All right, what's up? Welcome to What's on the Menu Daily. I had to pop on here really fast because there was some pretty big headlines that happened in the last 48 hours that just we can't leave unnoticed. So we obviously know that NFL free agency is kicking off next Monday. And what has been the running topic for Get Up and the rest of ESPN and First Take, Aaron Rodgers' contract, and it's normally Dallas Cowboy news, but he's just been the flavor of the month since I guess you could say they drafted Jordan Love, and that was in April of 2020, right when the pandemic started, but we'll leave that for a different day. So he gets the contract extension, and it's 4 years, $200 million, 153 million guaranteed. And we all know some of the headlines that Aaron Rodgers has stirred up, in the last year and a half or so. Most notably, the offseason last year, he was doing shrooms in Hawaii with Shailene Woodley before they broke up, and Jeopardy. We all know that. It's like, is he going to play? Is he going to retire? Then the whole, immunization. Does he have COVID and vaccinate? All that. Okay. So the Joe Rogan, ivermectin, all of the horse, stuff. So we know there's this narrative about Aaron Rodgers, and you guys know about the 12-day cleanse he did, where he's like throwing up and shitting and sweating, and he's getting all of his negative energy out. Okay, so and he goes on Pat McAfee, and watching Aaron Rodgers, yes, on the field, he wins, back-to-back MVPs, and he's super entertaining to watch. And, it just seems that obviously he's a super smart guy and he's a very calculated guy. So he knows every move he's going to make, whether it's on social media or if it's on the field. People are going to talk about it a lot, whether it's on Twitter, other social media platforms, it's on TV, radio, sports talk, all of it, podcast. So the biggest thing was, what is Rodgers going to do? Is he going to demand a trade? He had purchased land in Nashville already. So writing on the wall of, hey, can he go to the Titans? Is there going to work out some deal? Devontae Adams, what's going to happen with him? So Devontae Adams is going to get franchise tagged, and I don't want to go through all the franchise tags because everyone can just look that up. So he gets this extension. Aaron Rappaport drops it out, and it was a pretty big deal because now I don't know how many more angles ESPN can spin off of it, but now it's 4 years, 200 million, 153 million guaranteed, but another huge blockbuster trade happened with Russell Wilson. And before I get into the whole Russell Wilson thing, Aaron Rodgers then waits another 20 minutes after that happened, says, oh, you know what? I'm going to be returning for year 18, but the contract numbers and some of the stipulations haven't been met yet. So those are still being worked out. That's the most Aaron Rodgers thing ever, because of course he had to have the last word. He had to have the last say. He had to make a spectacle of himself so people continuously would talk about him, because he doesn't have a family. He's not married. He doesn't have kids. He has a weird family estrangement relationship. Kind of a lonely guy. Kind of feel bad for him, but hey, it is what it is. So you see that on Twitter, and look, he's coming back, and they're going to move around some cap room. He's going to get that $50 million or so a year threshold, and that's what he wanted about 3 weeks ago. It was reported, and now it's all but signed and sealed. Now let's get back to Russell Wilson. So the reason I started with Aaron Rodgers, because it preceded it. So we hear about Aaron Rodgers, then Russell Wilson. Adam Schefter tweets out that this is the biggest blockbuster trade in probably NFL history. Russell Wilson is no longer a Seattle Seahawk. He is being dealt over to the Denver Broncos. Wow, that's a mouthful. Take a deep breath. Okay, that's kind of crazy, okay? Now, we know that free agency, as I mentioned, it's going to kick off next week. The new league year, the 2022-2023 NFL season is going to kick off next week. Russell Wilson, who in the last couple of years, I'd say 2 years for sure, rumblings on the wall, does Sierra like Seattle? Did she need to be in a bigger market with her business? Obviously, their kids. There was a lot of rumors about some of, I guess, the locker room dynamic relationships and some of the other things that were being said about Russ, whether it was behind his back or to his face or with teammates. And then there was Russell Wilson himself, his relationship with the front office, behind closed doors. Was he telling people he didn't want to be there anymore? He's not saying, hey, go Hawks or go 12s like he always does after every interview. So there was rumblings around that. So we were talking about how, and when I say we, everyone in the media, can he roll out another year? We know that, the Seattle Seahawks dealt for Jamal Adams, gave up 2 first-round picks. I mean, that was in and of itself probably one of the worst trades in the better part of the last 15 to 20 years. And, they gave up a lot of capital and assets for that, just for him to be hurt or getting toasted on coverages and beaten on plays and giving up big TDs. But I mean, man, you think, okay, it's Russell Wilson, even though he's so corny, Mr. Unlimited. He has to come back, right? He has to. He said he wanted to play for 25 years. He wants to play till he's 45. He wants to stay with the team that drafted him and finish his career there. Seattle fans know the pain of, the Mariners winning 116 games and then not winning the World Series, and then the Seattle Supersonics leaving. And then, so really the Seahawks have been the last hope. And Russell Wilson kind of was that beacon of hope for them. He's not there anymore. He's going to Denver. And it's really nuts, because there was like, hey, would Russell Wilson want to stay in the NFC? Because considering if you go to the AFC, how crowded it is. And he goes to a division that now has Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr, and the same conference as Joe Burrow, who just went to the Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Who knows with Doug Peterson, with the hiring in Jacksonville, could Trevor Lawrence step up? I mean, it's a super, super crowded field. And it just got a lot tougher. So, I mean, there's so many angles I wish I could, that we could go in. I mean, just really quick on Seattle, the Seattle era is done. And you really got to think back to that Super Bowl where Malcolm Butler makes that interception. Was that a game? Not just game, obviously, because the Patriots won. That gave Brady his 5th ring or 4th ring. Same with Belichick. But from the Seattle side, that's where a lot of the Legion of Boom, that's where they broke up, like Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, who shortly retired, I think a season or 2 after that. Byron Maxwell went to Philadelphia. Richard Sherman was on record, because he's just so boisterous, saying he blamed that on Russell Wilson. That was their fault. They should have handed it off to Marshawn Lynch, but they wanted to basically, and I say the Seahawks, make that Russell Wilson's team. He was on the verge of a huge contract extension, and they wanted to have him make the game-winning play when they should have just given it to Marshawn Lynch. That wasn't the case. And then there was, you hear those rumors later that offseason, they go to Hawaii and they're on the beach and they're making these rumors and having a retreat because they're so pissed that Russell Wilson was on that pass, whatever. So that kind of sent the organization in a tailspin, because the early part of the 2010s, I mean, Seattle was in it every year, right? I mean, it was them or the 49ers, kind of trading blows. They were in the NFC title game a couple of years in a row, and then going to the Super Bowl. And, Seattle actually won a Super Bowl. They beat Peyton Manning. That was the year the ball went over Manning's head, on the first play of the game. It was in New York. It was in the cold. We all know that. Okay. So Seattle's done. And then they released Bobby Wagner, who got there the same year as Russell Wilson. So they're both drafted in 2012, 10 years. I mean, what a great run. Pete Carroll, 71, 72 years old now. I mean, if you're the Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray, who's kind of seeking out another, a big deal, you look at the pecking order of these quarterbacks, right? Think of the NFC. Tom Brady retires, and there's still rumblings about him possibly returning or going to San Francisco. We don't know. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get dealt. So you have Aaron Rodgers who's going to resign. You have Dak Prescott, who had to restructure his contract. You have Matt Stafford, who just won the Super Bowl, albeit this is kind of an interesting window for the Rams because I don't know how much it's going to be open. Kyler Murray's in there, and this is a crazy time. So let's put this to the AFC now. So you have Wilson going to the Broncos, and what have we heard about the Denver Broncos the last couple of years? It's they're just a quarterback away. They have these pieces on, offensively and defensively. Jerry Jeudy. Here's the thing. I should have disclosed this. So Russell Wilson. Here's what each team got. Okay, so Denver gets Russell Wilson in a 4th round selection. In return, Seattle receives 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th round pick, along with quarterback Drew Lock and Shelby Harris and tight end Noah Fant. You like the prospects of Noah Fant because he's young. He's only been in the league 2 or 3 years. Big body, can catch, super athletic. And with the implementation of a giant spread passing attack, hopefully he does well. The bad and good news is he's still stuck with Drew Lock. Drew Lock might be his friend, might be his buddy, might be in his wedding. The bad news, he's his quarterback, so that's not the best deal. Shelby Harris kind of getting towards the age of 30 and beyond that. Yeah, PFF mid-grade. I think that's okay. I think for Seattle, though, it's just so nuts. You give up 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams, and then you get the first rounds back. You get those 2 first back. Essentially, it's just a wash. Like they just washed out. I don't know. But Denver, this is kind of nuts. And then everyone's hyping this up, but it's like, was this really the best decision for both sides? We're going to have to play the 5-year game and wait 5 years from now. What's going to happen? Did it work out for each team? Did one side benefit from the other? And if you're Russell Wilson, we said the same thing before. We thought Aaron Rodgers was going to get traded. Were you sure you wanted to go to the AFC? And of all divisions, you go to the West. Russell Wilson left one of the toughest divisions in the NFL, or at least in the conference, to go to the other conference in the toughest division. You're going up against Mahomes, Herbert, and Derek Carr, although a lot of people throw a lot of dirt on his name. Nothing to scoff at. He's been around long enough, and I think with the right pieces, Josh McDaniels is the head coach. Maybe this is it. They're still kind of getting adjusted to Las Vegas. They had the move a couple years ago. God, this is nuts. What a crazy time. I listed all those QBs, and if you're Russell Wilson, you got to assume that he's good for another several years. Obviously way more than 3, more than 5. I would say the next 7 to 8 years, he has solid football left. I believe he's 33. He's due for about $22 million owed to him in the next 2 years. So it was kind of a no-brainer for Denver. You team him up with Jerry Jeudy or Javonte Williams, who was a pretty standout rookie this last year from North Carolina. Everyone loved him in fantasy. Does he get him a couple more wins? Absolutely. I think so. That definitely makes a big difference. Their Super Bowl odds went from almost 23-1 to 14-1. They're in the neighborhood of teams like the Rams, the 49ers trying to contend for a title. Can they contend? Sure. Well, absolutely. I guess you could say that about any team. And obviously there's some that are better than others, but man, what a crazy time. I spent a lot of time with the quarterbacks. I want to touch this really fast, really, really fast. So Calvin Ridley, the wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. Calvin Ridley, let's backtrack. Let me give some context really fast. Last season, he stepped away because he had to deal with some mental health issues. And we're not poking fun. We're not putting that down. Yes, mental health is a super big deal. So he was away from the game, and it was kind of out of nowhere because I think it was on Halloween that everyone kind of received it. And of course, everyone selfishly says, oh, that he was on my fantasy team. Oh, how can you do this? Oh, gambling, blah, 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 blah. Speaking of gambling, he gets in trouble because he himself was gambling on NFL games. The report came out. He was dealing with that. He did this back in November when he was sitting out and not playing. He did it on his own phone. He did it under his own name and his own account, and I'm assuming his own credit card. And he literally said on Twitter that he bet $1,500 on a 3, 5, and 8 league, 8-team parlay. For those of you that don't know what a parlay is, you're picking multiple teams or events to happen, and if they all hit, you have a higher odds of winning more money. Okay, so on the surface, you think automatically Pete Rose, this is what he got in trouble for when he was coaching the Reds, and this is against the rules. I guess here's my biggest thing. He should not have done that. Let me be perfectly clear. Calvin Ridley should not have bet on his games. But this creates a super messy, sticky, prickly, thorny, whatever adjective you want to use to describe the relationship between legalized sports gambling and the NFL. Because the NFL is in bed with all of these sports books, right? All of these sports books, because they're getting a cut of the pie because so many people are wagering money. We're talking the $270 million they generated last year alone in the first year. Okay. So think of how many times you're listening to a show, you're watching a game, and FanDuel and DraftKings and Barstool and MGM and PointsBet, and you could blah, blah, blah. So many books Certain segments are sponsored by it. You have announcers talking about it, where before 5 years ago, you had head of network saying, if you talk about any sports gambling, you're fucking fired. That's literally the deal. And now it's part of the rhetoric. Okay. So again, what I was pissed about was the media and specifically Twitter just attacking him. Okay. And he's not going to make, so he's suspended for the 2022 season. He is going to lose $11 million. That's what he was set to make this year. He can apply for reinstatement in 2023. And this opens an entire giant can of worms, because it's like, is it enough? And then you have people talking about Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson hitting his kid. Okay, Ray Rice never played again. Okay, so yes, I understand. We were well aware. It was documented that Roger Goodell only gave him a 2-game suspension, but he never played again, and he was 26. So I'm so glad that happened, because domestic violence is a serious issue. You know, Adrian Peterson, he had the switch or whatever, hit his kid in the privates and the messages. That was handled in their crimes. I mean, that's a big deal. You just have some of the media that, I'm all for capitalism and I'm all for businesses making money. And again, that's what the NFL, they made the bed. Now they have to lay in it, right? So they have to deal with this issue. Calvin Ridley should not have bet on games. You should not, if you were a member of a league and specifically a team, he should have just been suspended for betting on the Falcons alone, because think of how many times myself, Dale, whoever had been burnt on fucking betting the Atlanta Falcons. But that's a separate joke. Okay. We can make those jokes because we're not employed. We're not NFL personnel. We can say that. Ridley should not have done that. He's wrong. Was the punishment fair enough? Was it lenient? Should he be blackballed? Time's gonna tell. He has about 2 days, I believe, that he can appeal this. I don't know if he's in any contact with the Players Association, but this is a big deal because it hurts the integrity of the game. It hurts the integrity of the NFL and the Shield itself, because there's a lot more messier matters when you get into the wrong hands of gambling. I always say, what do I always say? Okay, I make a lot of jokes about it, but you have to gamble responsibly within your own means. Now, what is $1,500 to a millionaire? Not a lot of money, right? Not a lot, but it's more of the principle of the entire thing and not just the practice of it. Okay. Are there other players that are probably gambling? Yeah. Are they probably giving money and setting aside offshore accounts or using bookies or yeah. But you know, he confessed. Everyone deserves a second chance, right? This is a really big deal. And I'm not saying he has to, serve all this time and be banished and blackballed, but maybe it was a mistake. Okay. This is basically strike two, right? Like if he does get another chance to get into the league, and this is why it's so interesting, because the NFL has never had to deal with this. This is kind of like the guinea pig experiment, because, they say it at symposiums, there's signs in the locker room. You cannot gamble on your own sport. I am well aware of that. That was not good. It was not smart of him. But I'm really very, very curious on how this will play out.